So you've had your podcast for a while and you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at the downloads, and you're like, the numbers are just not numbering. Like, where's everybody at? Everybody wanted me to start this podcast, so I started the podcast. Now ain't nobody listening to me. Like, what is going on? Okay? If you feel like that, then I made this video just for you guys because I understand the struggle. The struggle can definitely be real when you start something new and then you realize you're getting a little bit of crickets. So I want you to go through this video or listen to this video, and I want you to see if you are making some of these mistakes or maybe not doing some of these things, or maybe you are doing some of these things that you can maybe change to help you start to get some listeners. So the very first and common one that I find is that no one's listening to your podcast because don't nobody know you got a podcast. You think people know you got a podcast, but they don't know because you might have made like one post, you might have told a couple friends, and you was like, okay, so I have this thing, come and listen to this thing, and then you never spoke about it ever again. How people supposed to listen to it? They don't know about it, okay? Because you can tell, look, I can't even remember what I ate for dinner yesterday, let alone you want me to remember that you had a podcast. So you have to be mindful that you got to keep marketing your podcast and keep bringing up the fact that you have one. You have to create it as a part of your marketing strategy and weave that into your content, whether that be sending out a weekly newsletter to your email list, informing them on your new episodes, whether that's a social media post of you just recording behind the scenes of your podcast. Like, just keep it front and center for people to remember, hey, I got this thing that I'm working really hard on, like, come and listen. You have to keep doing that. So that's the first reason why no one's probably listening to your podcast. The second reason is because you're not listed on the major platforms. So even if people wanted to listen to your podcast, you're making it inconvenient for them to try to listen to your podcast. And so people are always going to opt out and just choose the easy option. That's going to be to not listen. And what I mean by you're not listed on the major platforms, I mean on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you're not on those platforms, what are you doing? Like, how are people supposed to listen to you if they don't have a way to listen to you? And Facebook Lives, the Zoom calls, and Facebook groups do not count. I've said this in a couple of my other videos, but I can't reiterate this enough, that people are literally out here creating podcasts that are Facebook Lives. The whole benefit of audio podcasts is that it's audio format. So you can listen to it in the car. You can listen to it while you're at little Johnny's football or basketball practice. You can listen to it while you're getting ready in the morning or while you're washing dishes. Like, it's convenient because you can multitask while still having your podcast in your ear. So you need to make it convenient for people to access your podcast. Now, there's other podcast platforms as well that you can be listed on that other people will listen on it as well. But you definitely need to be on the main three, Apple, Google, and Spotify. Because Apple, for one, is the main platform that people listen to podcasts on. And then Google and Spotify are like the close second. So get on there. If you need a hosting platform, I highly recommend Buzzsprout. This is not sponsored, but I'm claiming that they're going to sponsor me eventually because I'm about to be plugging them so many times. But you can use Buzzsprout, and they will allow you to get listed on all the major platforms as well as additional ones that you may not even think about, where you can have your podcast on those as well. So if you would like to learn more about Buzzsprout, click the link in the description box and you can get started. Another reason why people are not listening to your podcast is because you're just not picking topics that your audience is really interested in. This is kind of tricky because a lot of people create podcasts as like a passion project. They have a lot that they want to say. They have a lot that they want to share. And a lot of the times you'll find that your podcast is a little too broad and talking about too many things. And as a result, you kind of miss the mark a little bit. So you want to make sure that you are hitting on topics that your listeners will want to listen to. And you want to make sure that you're hitting on topics that are going to be valuable to your listeners. So not just like sharing your story and sharing your journey. I'm not saying not to do that, but instead of making your podcast episode specifically about sharing your journey and your story, Weave your story and your journey in the topics that are going to be providing value to the listener. Always keep the listener in mind. And maybe another thing is maybe you have really great topics, but your titles are just falling flat. Like they're just not appealing. You're putting the bare basics or the bare minimum into what the name of your episodes are. And the titles really do make a difference. They make a difference because if you put a generic title that's not appealing to your listeners, they're not going to click on it. So it's just like with YouTube. Like you have to make sure that you use keywords in your YouTube titles. Make sure that it's like not clickbait, but like intriguing curiosity. That's why a lot of people fall into the clickbait category because they try to do it a little too much. But when you are creating your episodes, you want to have a title that is going to make people be like, I've always been interested in that. And a really great way to do this, if you're not sure how to do this, is to ask a question in your episode title. So maybe this is something that people always wanted to know. So the title of this video, for example, is "Why is no one listening to my podcast?" Well, you know it worked because you're watching the video, right? Because you want to know the answer. That is a catchy title versus me saying, here's some top tips for growing your podcast. So although that's not a bad title, someone may not click on that as fast versus them dealing with no one listening to their podcast and they want to know why ain't nobody listening. And then I do a video or a podcast episode specifically talking about that. You're going to click fast because you can relate to that question. So work on your titles, work on different ways that you can create better titles. And if this is something you're interested in me going in more depth about, I actually have like a list that I utilize for my channel and like for my content, where it's basically like a list of different title ideas. If that's something you're interested in, drop a fire emoji in the comment section and I will actually create like a downloadable PDF that I will, allow you guys to have for free in like a future video or something like that. Another reason why no one is listening to your podcast is because they are intimidated by the length of your podcast. Maybe your episodes are a little lengthy, they're a little too long, okay? If you got an hour length podcast, if you don't have a big audience or if you don't have an established brand where people already trust what you're going to talk about, and then sometimes even still, people just ain't got an hour to be listening to what you got to say. So it's easier if you have smaller episodes. So the next question I know you're going to ask or wonder is, how long should my podcast episodes be then? If I'm doing like 40 minutes to an hour, like how long should it be? I would suggest that you do your episodes 10 minutes, the minimum 10 minutes, the max 30 minutes. Now, granted, depending on what you're talking about, you might go to 35, but when you hit that 40-minute mark, you're in the red, okay? You're in the red of intimidating your listeners. So you're probably going to get less listeners on that episode specifically if they're not used to your brand, they are not used to the type of content that you create, and they're just not willing to give you 40 minutes, but they may give you 10. They may give you 10, and then that 10 will turn into an hour because now they're binging your content versus they just see all of your episodes are an hour or 2 hours, or well, not 2 hours, like an hour long, and they're like, girl, I ain't got that. I ain't got that to test on your episode, so just keep that in mind. Another reason why no one is probably listening to your podcast is maybe they did listen to your podcast initially and the audio was just so horrible, they just could not bear to listen to it. And I'm just going to be completely real because I have heard it happen before. And I want to ask you, are you recording with your phone? Do you have an official podcast mic? And not only that, are you using the proper software to record your episodes? There's a software called Audacity. That's what I recommend all of my clients use. That's what I use. It is free 99. You ain't got to pay nothing for it. And that is how you record your podcast episodes. Also, I don't have my podcast mic right here. Matter of fact, I'm going to go get it, okay? I'm going to help y'all out. I went and got it just for y'all, okay? So you see my mic. I have a Blue Yeti mic for anyone that's interested. This is not sponsored either, but hey, if you're looking for a good mic, Blue Yeti. And I know you probably see this attached to it. You're like, girl, what is that? Like, I ain't never seen, I might have seen it, but I don't know what it is. What's the purpose, what I use it for? This is called a pop filter, okay? This helps you when it comes to the P's, the like loud letters, any like extra distracting noise. This softens the blow before it hits the mic. So this allows you to keep your audio to a certain point in like the sound wave where it's not like going into the red. I'm kind of getting a little technical here, but just stay with me. It makes it better for the listener. It makes it a smooth wave format when it comes out the mic, for example. So make sure that you have the proper equipment whenever you are working on your podcast, whenever you are recording your podcast episodes. And then I gotta say this because I hear people doing this. I've even seen a big creator doing this. If you have kids or even maybe a dog, please either put the dog or the animals away, like put them somewhere, take them outside. Kids, let them know like, hey, I'm about to record something. Like, do not have your kids whining and crying and doing all of this stuff in the background because it is distracting and it lowers the quality of your podcast, okay? I have literally seen creators with their baby and their toddlers on their lap and the toddlers like whining during the podcast, and I'm looking at the video podcast and I'm like, if I was on audio, I could not listen to this. Like, this would be... So just keep that in mind. Like, just always keep the listener in mind. If the quality you might think is cute, but it's not cute. Okay, it's not cute. You want the audio to only be of you in as least distractions as possible. So I'm gonna just say that. I hope I ain't step on no toes, but you know, I had to get it out there. Okay. So I have a couple more. I already hit on this one, so I won't go into as much detail. But like I said, no one's probably listening to your podcast if you are hosting your podcast on like a Facebook Live, on a Zoom call, or in a Facebook group where people have to request to join the Facebook group in order to get access to the podcast. You're doing too much. Okay, let's keep it simple. Let's get our Buzzsprout account and let's get listed on the regular platforms, and then let's go from there. And then maybe people aren't listening to your podcast because you don't necessarily have an established brand or online presence yet. Like, you are brand new in the game. This is like the first type of content you've created. Like, this is brand new. Well, I have a rude awakening for you. This is just the beginning, my friend. Because now you need to create a brand around you to attract people to even be interested in listening to your podcast. Because there's one thing when you're talking to your friends or your family or somebody on the phone and you're like, hey girl, you know, you had this great conversation. And then it's like, oh my God, you should start a podcast. That would be great. People have to know that you provide good value in your conversations. And the only way that they're going to know that is if you have a brand before they listen to your podcast, right? You have a brand before they listen to your podcast, or if you're doing like video podcasts and you're doing like TikToks and things like that, then that will be helpful. But people need little snippets of what they're going to get before they hop on your podcast. So definitely make sure you create a brand around you, because you are your personal brand and your podcast is an addition to your personal brand. And this brings me to my last thing that I'm going to mention today is you have a small audience. If you don't have a brand presence, or if you don't have a brand, or maybe you're brand new, like maybe you just started your business and you don't have like a large audience, you don't really have an established audience, your audience is pretty small, just like a couple of your Facebook friends or something like that. That's why no one's listening to your podcast, and that's okay. It's okay, because we're going to work to grow our podcast and grow our audience with our business. So honestly, it's just a part of the process. What I would recommend for you if you're in this position is to just keep at it. Just keep building up your content, because as you grow your audience, you're going to have a content bank of podcast episodes that they can consume and binge listen to, you know, throughout whenever, because they will always be there as long as you continue to host them on the platform. So it's okay. Like, this is a marathon. This is not a race. This is something that is ongoing that you're going to be doing. You're not going to just right off the bat always start off with a ton of listeners, and that's okay. This gives you the perfect opportunity to get out the kinks. Go ahead and figure out what else it is that you need to do to make this podcast better. If you're not using the proper equipment right now, this gives you the chance to start using the proper equipment. Maybe you need to end your season one. This is what I would do. If you realize, like, look, my quality ain't that great, like my kids crying in the background, like whatever, maybe you need to end your season and start a new season with a new rebrand. You know what I'm saying? Like, start with a new rebrand. Be like, look, I'm back to you guys. I noticed that the quality was not as great, but this is what I'm going to be, bringing to you guys now. And just share that with your audience. So if they do listen to it, they'll be like, okay, girl, because I was struggling with that, but we're going to give you another chance. So just keep that in mind. So if you made it this far, then thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that you can get more content like this, because I'm going to be talking about podcasting for this entire month. And if you watch this after I've done like my little spiel of podcasting, make sure that you click the icon on whatever side. I'm going to drop my playlist for my podcasting tips, so that way you can get more tips on how to grow your podcast, how to make money from your podcast. If you don't even have a podcast yet, I'm going to be having videos on there on how to start your podcast and all the good stuff. So until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.